a second. Just went live on YouTube as well. Just went live on YouTube as well. There we go. There's the echo. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Mega Wednesday. It's 9:59 Pacific AM. The day after the US election. And if you're like me, you probably have a bit of a election night hangover. Americans, you might not know this, but most of Canada was watching your election last night for sure. You are our neighbor, our only neighbor. And, you know, what happens in the United States has a big impact on our lives here. So I was definitely watching. I watched pretty late, too late. Didn't have a great sleep last night. And I'm sure most of you did too. So even though the show is normally about making your own stuff and creating mostly digital products, software, maybe an online training course, maybe an app, and the Mega Maker community in particular is about, you know, earning an independent income from the things you create. And kind of this new economy that's, you know, people like me and many others who are kind of carving out a little niche for themselves in the world. Man, this microphone is going to be, I'm trying out this mic today, but it is, it's going to be in the way. Normally I like to be a little bit more free, but what was I saying? I'm going to be a little bit disjointed today, just as a warning. Normally the show is for independent creatives who are carving out this niche for themselves, as people that are, you know, creating things and then putting them out into the world and actually making a living doing those things, as opposed to having maybe a traditional job or starting a venture-backed company or something. So yes, people are feeling real emotions this morning. I'm seeing some folks in the YouTube chat kind of comment about how they're feeling. In Facebook, if you guys want to comment about how you're feeling, feel free. And that's something that, you know, that's we're gonna be in the midst of that context. I'm not going to ignore that there's a lot of upset people this morning. I'm not going to ignore also that there's a bunch of people that are quite pleased this morning. Almost half the US electorate is, I would assume, is happy with today's or last night's election results. Here's the pink sippy cup. Always a silver lining, because eventually the pink sippy cup shows up on the show. So I'm going to acknowledge all of those feelings. I'm also going to acknowledge that while most of my community in the tech space and the startup space and, you know, the bubble that I am in, most of them were hoping Trump would not get elected. But there are, you know, I do have friends and other folks that were either wanted Trump to be elected or did not want Hillary to be elected. And so they're on the other end of the spectrum. And that the challenge in this time is to be respectful of everyone, no matter where they're at. And also, as makers, I think we have different thoughts. One is I've been thinking about how much time as a frickin' Canadian I've spent worrying and thinking and debating and talking and writing and reading about this election, and how much of my productivity has been lost to this election. So that's one thought. The other thought is, oh, look at, okay, that's fine. The other thought is, what does this mean for us as creative people, as people that are trying to earn a living from the things we create? We're now in a new world. There's a new president, newly elected government in the, for me, my biggest market. Most of my customers are in the United States. For most of the world, if you are building digital products, software, training, whatever, most of your customers are in the United States. And so, this is a new reality for all of us, and we have to kind of figure out what our response is. So I am getting questions from folks about creating things. And again, some folks pro new government, some folks anti new government, and some folks are asking questions about typical Mega Maker Faire, which is, how do you create things? I want to talk a little bit about some of my thoughts this morning. And this is going to be a little bit disjointed, but I have 5 or 6 points, and then I'll answer some questions. I'll discuss as long as I think I have things to say and I'm not just rambling. Number 1, people want to make progress in their lives. This has been a trend that we've been talking about for a long time, and I think this is more evident now than ever. But this is a universal truth. From the time we are born to the time we die, we want life to be better. There's no one, unless they're quite ill, that wants life to be worse. And that factors into that factors into what motivates us, our actions, our thinking. It motivates how we respond to the world. So people want to make progress in their lives. Number 2, when people don't make progress, they get frustrated. And I'm sure you guys can think of this. I'm sure you folks can think of situations where you felt stuck, or where you felt like you weren't moving forward, or where you felt like you had a vision of a better life and you could not reach it. And, you were frustrated by that. And the example I give quite a bit is when I was commuting an hour into work every day, I was extremely frustrated about the commute. I wanted to be anywhere except in my car every day for 2 hours. And my frustration was, I need to get out of this car. I need a shorter commute. I need a different job. I need to be able to work remotely from home. Like, I had all these visions of a better life. And, in my feeling of being stuck and being frustrated in this place where I felt like I had no movement, I had no freedom to change my situation, the natural response to that is frustration. So out there on the internet, you can also maybe just take a moment right now and think of a time where you were frustrated because you weren't making progress, where you were frustrated because you felt like you were stuck, and just how that feels. Now, I'm on the other side of that now. I don't have a 1-hour commute. My dream of a better life when I was stuck in that car in traffic was looking at all these folks zipping by me on their bicycles and thinking, man, if I could one day ride my bike to work, that would just be absolute heaven. And now I get to do that, but it's easy to forget the frustration I felt. I remember coming home after my 2-hour commute, and I always came home grumpy and angry. And my wife said, what's wrong? And I said, well, it feels like every day I get in that car and I have to go to work and come back and do this 2-hour commute that I feel like is killing me. And it feels like I'm in this tunnel and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, but I'm so restricted, I can't even move my arms to crawl through the tunnel. I don't know if that's a good image, but I felt like if I was making progress, it was so slow. It was just like crawling forward with my arms jammed up against my sides. So when people don't make progress, that's my second point, they get frustrated. And this is universal. Everybody feels like this, whether you're in Canada or the United States or Mexico, whether you are in the top 1% of income earners in the world, or whether you, struggle to have enough to eat and to shelter yourself every day. Everybody wants to make progress, and when they don't make progress, they feel frustrated. Point number 3 is that most of the time, when we're faced with this frustration, we try to solve it internally first. You might think, oh, I've just lost my job. I'm going to just go out and try to get another one. Or in my case, it was like, okay, I don't like my commute. I'm going to talk to my boss and see if my boss will allow me to work from home one day a week. Or I'm going to go out and apply for a remote job. Or I'm going to start a little side project, a little side business that allows me to earn a little bit of income, and maybe one day I'll be able to have enough that I don't need to commute 2 hours a day. So point number 3 is that most of the time people try to solve their frustration internally first. But point number 4 is if they keep failing to make progress personally, they'll start expressing themselves outwardly. And this is when folks turn to, political activism sometimes, demonstrations, rallies, but also just like maybe asking for help. Sometimes, I've had friends struggle with alcoholism, and they try to deal with it first internally, and that doesn't work. And then eventually they try to find an outward solution. Maybe that would be Alcoholics Anonymous or something. But eventually, when people can't solve the problems themselves, they look outside for help. And that's the truth in any election. It's also the truth with how why people buy products. And in this election we just had, we had a lot of folks that were really unhappy, really felt like the progress that they wanted to make in their lives, their idea of a better country, their idea of a better life, their idea of a better future for their kids was not aligned with how things were going. And those are very emotional kind of responses, but that's what makes people human. And so, like I said, about half the electorate felt like the status quo was not giving them the progress they wanted in their lives. So those were the 4 points I wrote. And Andrew, I will get to your question in a second. But so maybe I'll just go through those again because people are still joining. I just want to quickly go through those, and then I've got 2 other thoughts I want to share. So number 1, people want to make progress in their lives. Number 2, when they don't make progress, they get frustrated. Number 3, first, people will try to solve their frustration themselves personally. But number 4, if they keep failing to make progress, that the frustration grows to the point where it's expressed outwardly. And by the way, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes that's means, you're so fed up with the system that you go and vote and try to change the system. Sometimes that means you're so desperate for help that you go to Alcoholics Anonymous. So those were the 4 points. And I'm saying these are true for business and for politics and just for humans in general. Okay. If anyone has questions about that, feel free to ask. Here's the other thing, the other thought I had is yesterday I wrote this draft for a blog post. I printed it out. Called "Most Stuff Isn't That Good." And in light of my feelings about today, and again, for those that are coming in now, full disclosure, I'm on the disappointed side of how I feel about today, how I feel about the results of the 2016 US election as a Canadian looking from the outside in. A 36-year-old Canadian, white, male, all those things. But I'd written this before the election results. And so maybe I'll just read it to you and then I'll tell you what I was kind of thinking. So most stuff isn't that good. I start with this quote from Chris Rock. He says, "If most things were good, I'd be making $15 an hour. I don't live the way I live. I don't have the success that I have because most things are even remotely good." And so his comment is, people don't, most things out there aren't that good. And the reason he's been successful is because he's been able to rise above the noise and create something that is so good that people can't ignore him. And that's, a typical thought. If you're so good, people won't be able to ignore you. Again, this is interesting in light of the election. I know a lot of people that voted Republican for this last election that don't like Donald Trump, that don't think he is a good person, that don't think he's a good businessman, that think he is, a lot of the things he says and does are deplorable. So most things aren't that good. And so back to my blog post. Most software is terrible. Most blog posts are boring. Most movies suck. And I said, here's the thing. People only have time to read, watch, and use the best. If you want people to care, you have to make better stuff. Now, if I just left it there, I think you can see the gap. First of all, what is good is completely in the eye of the beholder. Some people think that this live video stream is good. Some people don't. Some people like the things I write and think that it is excellent. Some people think the things I create are not excellent. So obviously, I think that Nacho Libre is one of the best movies ever made. And lots of people think that it is not a good movie, that it is a poor quality movie. Some people, I think most people, if you look at the favorability ratings, thought that Donald Trump was not a good person. But that didn't stop him from winning the election, right? Nacho! That's right. So it is not always about making better stuff if you're a maker. And so I continue. When I say make better stuff, I'm not talking about taste, polish, or technical expertise. So if you're building software, it's not about writing better code. If you're writing a book, it's not necessarily about having perfect grammar. If you're creating art, it's not about having the best taste. If you're making music, it's not about having a song that is critically acclaimed. That making better quality stuff, again, in the eye of the beholder, but better quality in the eye of the maker, the person creating things, doesn't necessarily mean your thing is going to be more popular or is going to have more sales. Back to my blog post. And again, I think I'm not quite there, because you'll see. I'm talking about improving your users' lives. Make stuff that helps them overcome obstacles. Give them hope for a better tomorrow. Don't focus exclusively on aesthetics, materials, and assembly. Product quality matters, but only in as much as it delivers progress for your users. So I think we can see that there's a huge emotional component here. Whether it's politics or the things you create, we need to build stuff that helps people feel like they're overcoming obstacles in their lives, that's getting them closer to the better life that they see in their minds, that gives them hope for tomorrow. And one thing that concerns me is that increasingly we are living in, I was going to say bubbles, but gated communities. So if you were to browse my Twitter stream, it is predominantly liberal. It is predominantly pro-Hillary. It is predominantly pro-technology, pro-startup, pro-San Francisco. And that's, in a way, the gated community I live in. And over here, you might have, there's all sorts of these communities, and they are separated. They are bubbles. And we have to be careful about that, I think, especially in technology. A lot of the things we create in technology are having huge social consequences. So when Uber disrupts the taxi industry, that has a huge effect on the millions of people that depend on driving a taxi for their livelihood. And we can see this if you've ever browsed. I'll find the link. I think it's a NPR interactive map that shows most popular jobs by state over time. One that's disappeared is secretary. One that's disappeared is manufacturing. And the technology and the products that we're creating is sometimes responsible for that shift, right? There's going to be increasing automation. There's going to be more robots and software and algorithms doing things that were previously done by people. And for a lot of folks in this election, and a lot of folks just worldwide, their frustration that they're feeling and the lack of progress that they're feeling is that they've been left behind. They used to have they used to be able to make a comfortable living for generations, building cars or driving taxi or being a secretary or, being a farmer. And that those ways of life are being disrupted by technology and automation. And you can't. It's really difficult to slow technology down or to try to stop progress. But what we can do as makers is we can be mindful about the kind of social effects that the things we create have. And again, I haven't quite come to any conclusions about that, but the things we create, the things we put out into the world, the services we offer, the things we write, the things we tweet, the things we put on Facebook, the things we share, the technology I espouse, the devices I buy, the services I use, they all have ramifications on the greater world. And the technology sector has been good at driving the tech forward and the automation forward and the algorithms forward, but we haven't been great at figuring out how to deal with the real human beings that we affect with the things we create. And by the way, included in this are, the algorithms that decide what you see, for example, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that are really reinforce these bubbles that I was talking about before. So that's a quandary. We need makers, people that create things that are mindful about the things they create and the effects that they might have. And maybe we have not had the empathy that we've needed. So for example, I don't know if Travis, the founder of Uber, has ever just gone and hung out with taxi drivers and just lived a day in their shoes. Everything from getting up at 5 a.m. and kissing your wife and kids goodbye to dealing with rude customers, dealing with traffic, dealing with, all the challenges they have in their life. That I don't know how he would respond to that, but that empathy and that understanding, I think, is important, especially if your product's going to disrupt people's lives. I just want to, some comments are floating by here, and I just want to kind of acknowledge them. So Josh Smith, who was quite active this past election, he said, if you're a maker, product person, designer, developer, and want to make a difference, there are places for you: CodeCore, Progressive Coders, etc. Those are places on the liberal or I don't. Do you guys say Democrat side that are working towards change? There's sorry. There's a lot of comments here, and Corey Stone asks, "What do Canadians think of the U.S.?" You have you can have Bieber and Drake back. So again, I'm in a certain bubble. There's a big difference between what, for example, people in the province of British Columbia think versus folks in Alberta. There's also, like you, people have different opinions based on their age, based on all sorts of, stage of life, how much frustration they're feeling at that point. But one thing that I think Canadians as a whole would have been much more favorable towards Clinton, and partly because we were a little bit more on the we're definitely more to the left as a country than the U.S. is. We have public health care. We have a lot of social programs. We have higher tax rates. The US is hugely important for us. So what happens in the US has a direct effect on our lives. We have the biggest unguarded border in the world, I think, and it's because up till now, we've had a very amicable relationship with the US most of the time. But every decision that gets made in US politics affects us. Our dollar was down last night and I think this morning because our economies are so tied. Any decisions the US government makes about trade, all those things affect us. And my worry, if you want to ask me personally about Trump specifically, is that I believe he's a bully. So that's my opinion. And I worry about having a bully right next door leading the country when basically Canada is like if the US wanted to invade us, it would, you have the military and like we have nothing to protect ourselves from. So, and maybe that's just ridiculous thinking, but those are some of the thoughts off the top of my head. Definitely everyone cares. Everyone's watching the election. And like I said, there's a big section of the population that would have been pro-Trump as well. Okay, I mean, I can't address everything in the comments, but Andrew, I think it's Andrew Bass asks a traditional kind of mega maker question, which is how hard would it be to earn an independent living from somewhere like the Cayman Islands, where because you can't meet people in real life. So I think I can answer that one. I live in the middle of nowhere. And when I moved here, my whole objective was to not let my location, my geographic location, hold me back from networking, making connections, building an audience. And so basically, I think within the first couple months that I'd moved here to the middle of nowhere in British Columbia, it's not the middle of nowhere, it's a beautiful place. But there's not the same kind of serendipity I would have in San Francisco or New York, Vancouver, Toronto, even, a mid-sized city like Edmonton or Calgary. My goal was I wasn't going to let that stop me. And so within a couple months of moving here, I started my podcast. And the whole idea with that is if I could seek out the smartest product people in the world and interview them, I would be able to build relationships with those folks, create a network, and also learn. And so I think it is a little bit more challenging because in some geographic locations like San Francisco, you can walk out your door and be able to make connections just running into people at the coffee shop. But I think if you're mindful about it, you can create those connections, even if you're, even if you're in somewhere that's not somewhere that's more remote. All right. So, yeah, and again, I'm kind of responding to comments here, and some of what I'm saying is just top of mind, not very well thought out stuff. But I think I'm going to end fairly soon. But I had this other thought, which is a piece I wrote. It's at justinjackson.ca/desperation. I'll try to post that in the notes, in the chats here. justinjackson.ca/desperation. If anyone's on Facebook and is able to just post that into the chat there. The whole idea behind this piece, I started off this video talking about how people want to make progress in their lives. If they can't make progress, that feeling turns to frustration, and that frustration can turn into desperation. And this blog post I wrote basically says creativity's biggest enemy is desperation. And I tell this story about, and some of you might have heard this before, but a friend and I had started a couple retail shops in our early 20s, and it didn't work out. And we had to close, and there was quite a bit of debt that we had to pay off as partners. And I think, my amount was quite high for someone in the early 20s. I think it ended up being $80,000 or something that we had to figure out how to pay off. And I just remember that debt being such a huge burden on my life. And that period of my life was really quite dark, just because I had this weight of this thing crushing me. I had this failed business, and then there's just this weight of all this debt, and I'm newly married, and I've got a little baby, and I, don't have very much money. And then, what am I going to do? And I went from being a creative, energetic person to someone who was just anxious and just couldn't think straight. And, sometimes being desperate can be the push that we need. Sometimes when your back's up against the wall, it helps you muster a bunch of energy and pull up your bootstraps and just, push really hard. But desperation can also have the other effect. It can make you feel tired, hopeless, disoriented, and it can, metaphorically, it can squeeze the creative juice right out of you. And there's this really interesting Harvard research study from 2013 where they examined how financial stress can affect decision making. And basically, they gave car repairs, the cost of car repairs, to folks in a certain income bracket and then in a higher income bracket. And if the cost of the repairs was $300, and then they would test these people cognitively after. How well can they answer questions? How well can they remember facts? How well can they think creatively? So when the costs were relatively low, cognitive performance was not affected. But when the cost of a car repair was increased to $3,000, a very different picture emerged. The cognitive performance of those at the upper end of the income distribution was unaffected by the increase, but those at the lower end suffered a 40% decline. This means that the scarcity of funds impaired people's ability to think clearly. The threat, even an imagined threat of a large bill, made it difficult for the folks in a lower income bracket to focus on the cognitive tasks at hand. Now, the reason that desperation affects our thinking is because we're distracted by the stress. We so desperately want to make progress in our lives that we just become consumed by the short-term challenges in front of us. We can't see long-term. We can't make good, informed, rational decisions because we're blinded by, we're blinded by the stress. And this has been studied all all over the place. Robert Epstein says stress is a well-known creativity killer. And I think it's ironic, especially in the artistic community, but also in the independent maker movement and the entrepreneurial circles, that, you know, artists and makers and entrepreneurs are under stress all the time. And that stress removes the one thing we need to survive, which is our creativity. So I talk a little bit about what to do if you're ever in desperation mode. What are the things you should do? And, maybe these are just also good bits of advice when you're feeling stressed out about election results. But you can use these at any time of your life. Number one, support. Find a group of people that you can be real with. This could be an online community. It could be a friend you meet weekly for coffee, a mastermind group where every week you meet with the same people and just talk about the struggles you're having right now. Talk about, it's mostly for business, but here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Here's where I'm stuck. I think the point is you can't do it alone. You need people to look at your life and give you an outsider's perspective. So again, when we're in the haze of desperation and stress and anxiety, it clouds our vision, but having other people outside of your situation able to look in, it can help you see clearly. Number two is habits. Usually when bad things happen, I saw a lot of tweets last night and messages last night from people that were stressed out and, drinking some booze. And that's usually what happens when we're stressed out, is we rely on bad habits. More alcohol, more TV, less sleep, less exercise. And desperate times call for better habits, not worse. So you got to make sure you take care of yourself, getting a good amount of sleep, eat healthy food. I had a chocolate croissant this morning. I was a bit depressed. But now's the time for healthier food, not junk food. Exercise all the things you can control. Good habits are something still within your control. That's what you need to do. And then focus on the bottom line. So for us as makers, especially when you're starting out, I know a lot of you are starting out. Some of you have quit your job to focus on building a product full time, and it's hard, and you're under some financial stress. If you're struggling with money, your first step is to figure out what's the difference between what you need and what you currently have. If you need $5,000 and you have $4,000, well, focus on getting that last $1,000 the most efficient way possible. That could mean building a product, but it could also mean asking for a raise, doubling your freelancing rates, going out and getting a job. And the last 3 points are all about how to avoid desperation. So, and these were written for product people, but I think they apply again to any situation. Number one, don't quit your day job too soon. And this could also mean don't disrupt your life too much all at once. I worked on side projects for years before I went independent. And, when you're stuck at that day job that you don't like, or you're stuck within a system that you don't like, sometimes the response is to do something crazy to disrupt your life. And I think especially if you're in a stressful time, doing something crazy is not the best course of action. You want to keep things as stable as you can. So if you're trying to build a product, build things up on the side before you quit your job. If you live in the United States, don't move to Canada right now. Just stay where you are, stay calm, and work on improving the things you can control within your current situation. And then the last thing in terms of avoiding desperation is what I call getting in the habit of planting seeds and harvesting crops. The more I've been an independent maker, the more I realize that I'm a lot like a farmer. I'm constantly planting new ideas and and new projects with the hopes that I'll be able to harvest those efforts sometime down the road. And sometimes our desperation comes from bad planning. If we're an independent creative, we just have not kept our pipeline full. If you're a consultant, you need to have a pipeline of leads that you're closing. If you're building products, you need to have, a pipeline of features you're launching, or a bunch of launches you're doing, or, for me, it's like, I just need to keep making small products. I need to have something to sell this month, and I need to have something to sell next month. So think like a farmer. Plant new ideas, plant new projects with the hopes that you'll be able to harvest those down the road. And I think if you're unhappy politically, that also applies. Change does not happen overnight. And maybe actually one thing I'd encourage you to do is, like I talked before about bubbles and how we tend to stick within our ideological bubbles. But I think one way to make progress and to plant the seeds of progress is to start talking to your neighbor that is not very much like you in a respectful and human way. And, I have neighbors that sometimes say things that I think are very racist and sexist. And my response to those is to keep the relationship going, but respectfully challenge them on their viewpoints, as opposed to just like internalizing it and then going and grumbling to my wife about it. So I think we could have a lot more cross-pollination, a lot more people talking to their ideologically opposed neighbor, and being open to doing that, even if they are people that you don't agree with, because part of our challenge is that if everyone lives in their own ideological bubble, then we're going to continue to have, these two big groups of people that are always at odds with each other, always opposed to each other. And at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, the truth is that everybody just wants to make progress in their life. And when you understand that, and when you look at people's behavior through that lens, I think it's a lot easier to treat people humanely and and sow those seeds of progress, like I said, with the hopes of harvesting future progress in the future. So I think that's all I wanted to say. Like I said, a bit disjointed for this episode of Mega Wednesday. I do these every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, megamaker.co/live. There is a SMS number that you can sign up for and get notified whenever I do a new event. It's 424-247-5762. That's 424-247-5762. And basically, it's just a instant notification list. And that's what I use to communicate what I'm going to be talking about. Next week, I'm sure I'll be back to more kind of traditional fare, talking about earning an independent living from the things you make. But thank you for being with me during this time and kind of decompressing, or allowing me to decompress at least. Thanks for everyone that participated in the comments on YouTube. Facebook was a little bit quieter. Oh, I should answer Andrew's question before I leave. how did you know moving from Alberta to Vernon was the right disruption at the time? So that was a big change in our lives for sure. The one of the reasons I felt like I could do it was that the moving was the only disruption. I was staying in the same job. I wasn't same family, same kids, and lots of other things changed. Like my house changed. Also, I had friends in Vernon, so I knew I would still have a group of friends. Like my friendship group changed, but it also was some of those people stayed the same, right? And so the fact that it wasn't everything was changing. It wasn't new job, new house, new schools for the kids, new group of friends, new job responsibilities, it was like instead of everything changing, it was just like, okay, we're moving, so our house is going to change and the kids' school is going to change, but we're going to still have the same friends. Justin's still going to have the same job. And so that made it less of a disruption and less of a risk. Also, I felt like emotionally, I was stable. Now, if I'd made that decision to move when I was in my early 20s with a brand new baby and $80,000 of debt kind of squeezing me down, I don't think that would have been wise, because it would have just added more problems on top of the problems I already had. But the fact that, you know, my relationship with my wife was good, my relationship with my kids was good, my relationship with my friends was good, I was personally, emotionally, emotionally healthy, and the fact that only my job didn't change, and it was just the location changed, made it easier. But it was a risk. It could have turned out terrible. So you're always taking a risk. But in that case, in that particular case, it ended up being a good thing. All right. I don't want to lose people. I know people are still joining. So I don't want to keep repeating myself over and over again. But again, remember, as individuals, as human beings, as makers, as creatives, as citizens, once we understand that people want to make progress in their lives, everybody dreams of a better life. When they don't make progress, they get frustrated, and they want to solve the problem. And that frustration, if left unsatiated, unsatisfied, will eventually lead to desperation. And that is that's hard when that happens. But what we can do as makers is we can create the communities of people like I talked about before. We can create things that that help people make progress in their lives. We can also have empathy for the disruption that we create. So when our product creates disruption in people's lives, it might make some people's lives better, like Uber, but it might really harm other people. We need to have emotional empathy. We need to care for those people. We need to care about their situation. We need to recognize that, that's happened. And we need to also think about solutions for those societal problems that are being created from the things we create. All right. Thanks, y'all. I really appreciate all of you folks sticking around. And yeah, if you have comments, again, you can reach me on that text message number. You can reach me on Twitter. And you can also leave a comment. I got to end this now. Thanks again. See ya. Thanks, YouTube. Now I got to find stop broadcast. See you later. Have a great day.